I'm just
Oh yeah,
briefly curious.
I used to be the blue pill white knight. Police officers are usually fairly alpha in nature, and alpha and beta is one pillar, I guess you could say, and then red pill and blue pill. Back in those days, there was no such thing as red pill. Um, uh, I can tell you right now, before we go any further, the most dangerous man alive is a alpha blue pill white knight. And many, many police officers are exactly that. So, gentlemen, I'm warning you right now before we go any further. That's what you need to be extremely careful of in your travels,
Okay.
in coming in contact with police. Okay.
Okay. So let's talk about the you were talking about the most dangerous, blue pill alpha. What makes them, in your opinion, so damn dangerous?
Well, they have alpha tendencies. Okay, and they're white knights. They're capable. They're trained. They have authority. They've been in. I mean, let's face it. In my 17 years, I was in 40 legitimate fights. I've faced death. I had 5 different opportunities that I was legally justified in taking a human life. I chose not to do those things. I chose a different way, and God was on my side and helped me work through it. But when you've been through those experiences, you get to where you're not scared. You're scared, but you're capable. And there's nothing more dangerous than a capable, competent alpha white knight who's blue pill, gynocentric, indoctrinated.
Yeah. Okay, but I wanted to get into, like, say, how many domestic violence calls did you respond to?
Oh, God.
Hmm. And if you could give
Uh,
us, without naming names or too
no.
you know too descriptive
Oh,
circumstances, we don't want to cause any problems here, but just give us an idea of how some of those went.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Hmm.
We've talked in the past.
Right.
Um,
Well, or
I,
just act like me and you have talked, but a lot of these other people
yeah.
who might be watching have never heard
Well,
these
after
stories.
you've been through your 2 or 3 or 400th domestic violence call, you start to see a pattern, and
Okay.
and uh, and it always works. Not always, but most of the time, it works out like this. Um, yeah, he hit her, or he did something. But kind of like in basketball when they have what they call drawing the foul, where the offensive side makes an action that causes the defense to foul the offensive player. There's Women are extremely good at doing that with their language. Let's face it; they have a heightened or a much better language skill set because that's how they get done what they want to get done. Men fight in the physical, and women fight with words. It's called relational aggression, which is not looked at all in anywhere other than by guys like Tom Golden and Paul Elam, uh, who are psychologists who are really red pill. Paul Elam is actually the founder of A Voice for Men, which is where I originally came from into the manosphere. I found them first,
Okay,
way
I was
back
going
in
to ask that.
2010.
Yeah. Okay, great. I was going to ask, like, how you got your start. I mean, I actually had a friend basically say, "Hey, dude, uh, you need to read The Rational Male." So that was my start.
Yeah, the Rational Male didn't come to me other than a periphery. His blog, oh, back in the late 2000s, I would occasionally read a link of his, and I I joined So Suave for a short time, but I was so heavily invested in men's rights activism with A Voice for Men, thinking that we could actually make a difference. But let's face it, governments and cultures don't give a shit about men. They're only concerned about women.
Real quick, what else? I mean,
Well,
how
let's get
gynocentric are we talking? I know,
well,
you know,
yeah, let's get back on topic
right.
of see, I was a police officer back in the late '80s in my state, and that was actually before there were ever any domestic violence laws ever created. I mean,
Mm,
we had violence laws, we had assault, we had different levels of assault. Attempted murder, first degree, second degree, third degree assaults, and things like that. But in the late '80s, there was a big push in my state um, by uh, the organizations of women's shelters. And back in the late '80s, those organizations were all donation bound. They didn't get any government funding. And they were making a huge push. And I always say this, anything in politics, you want to understand what's really going on, you have to follow the money. Okay, so all of these homeless shelters adopted the Duluth model of abuse, the Duluth model power wheel. I'm sure anybody familiar with this has seen the Duluth model power wheel. Um, and every state in the United States, the Duluth model power wheel has been used in large part to create domestic violence laws, which on their face appear to be gender neutral. But when you dig into them and you have to look closely at the wording of the domestic violence laws and then actually go back to the definitions section, because in every state statute, they will give you what they call the elements of the crime, and they will bullet point list if this occurs and this occurs and this occurs, it's this crime. But those words in that section of statutes will always have a preamble of definitions, and you have to go back to the definitions to find out what those placeholder words actually mean. And I'll give you an example. In my particular state, they use a phrase in the domestic violence laws that say primary physical aggressor. Now, on its face, most people would think that primary physical aggressor simply means the one who starts the fight or the most aggressive, right? The
Well,
one who's at
yeah.
fault, one would think. However, you have to go find that statute, and then you have to go to the very beginning of the definitions and look up the definition of primary physical aggressor. And when you do that, and every state uses a similar phrasing, they're all individual in how they word their things, but they all basically say the same thing. And in my particular state, primary physical aggressor simply means the one that would be most likely to inflict the most damage if the altercation were allowed to continue. In most cases, that's almost always going to be the man, simply because the man is 40% larger because we're a sexually dimorphic species. So that on its face, if you look at equal rights, is discriminatory against men.
But what about the guys who are in relationships? What would you recommend that if they have a fight that seems to be a little too
Oh,
heated, just leave?
you
Something
better
like,
not be there when the cops get there. That's
uh,
first and foremost.
so don't
Don't
be
be
there.
there. Don't be there if the cops get there. That's number one. Number two, if she ever threatens, not that she does call the cops, if she ever so much as threatens to call the cops, kick her ass to the curb, because that's nothing but a reframe. She's trying to take you out of your frame and put you in her frame and control the relationship. The minute a woman starts talking about divorce or starts talking about I love you but I'm not in love with you, next her ass.
I, I'm, I'm right there with you, dude. But, however, okay, let me throw another curveball at you. What if you are there when the cops show up? What's the best way to respond when the cops show up?
Comply.
Just comply, keep your mouth shut, basically.
Hey, you have the right to remain silent. Use it.
Okay.
Remember the Miranda warning says you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Why would you ever give them anything they could use?
So what you're saying is they might even try to play good cop, like with you, be all buddy and we're here to help, bud, and then you should have pled the fifth and kept your mouth shut.
And that's one of the techniques. Get on your good side, pat you on the back, treat you like a good guy. Hey, if you give me, if I used to do it all the time, man, it's an investigation.
I know at my old job we got taught to do that as well.
It's like, hey, if you go ahead and confess to me, I'll make sure the prosecutor sees this, and I'm sure we can get some mercy for you. Yeah, that's bullshit. We just want to close the case. Whatever happens in court happens in court. That don't matter. I gotta investigate. I gotta close the case. I gotta try to do everything. There's 6 questions: who, what, when, where, how. Those you can answer. Why? Why is the only question you can answer with an admission of guilt. They'll have to tell you why. That's the bow on the wrapper. When you can get an admission, that's when you close the case. And they don't give a shit about you. Those cops don't care. They have their own life. It's kind of like hiring a lawyer. Your lawyer will tell you he's on your side. But the reality is, number one, he's on his side. His job is to make as much money for he and his family as he can first. Second, he is an officer of the court. He takes an oath. He swears an oath to protect the court, the system of the court. The third thing he does is he protects his industry. And protecting his industry is to promote his industry, because law is a parasitic industry. It doesn't produce anything. It only detracts, much in the way that police work does, other than you can't quantify that a good police technique just solves crime just because of the officer's presence. But when you hire a divorce lawyer or you need a lawyer to defend you, you're about fourth in line of priority. The only person that you're above is your opponent in divorce court.
What is one of the most crazy calls you've ever had to respond to without, giving us too much information that you're allowed to talk about? How about that? That you would be allowed to talk about?
Okay. I was a young cop, still a rookie. I'm just going to qualify this. A police officer is a rookie for at least 3 to 5 years before he gets enough experience to be an experienced officer. So he'd be a semi-trained, rookie. I got a call to a domestic in one of the local shithole trailer parks.
Oh boy.
I roll up on the scene and I get out of the car, and this single wide trailer it is bouncing off the wheels, rocking back and forth. And I just hear thunder and crashing going on inside of this thing. And I'm like, holy shit. I hear women screaming, and I hear man hollering at the top of his lungs. And I'm thinking, oh my God, somebody's getting killed in here. So I tried to do a knock and announce, if you know what that is. That's where you just lightly knock on the door and say, police, I'm coming in. And then you come in. They didn't hear you, but you come on in anyway. It's just a semantic of a way to get in. The door was locked. So I had to actually, to get their attention, I had to actually beat on the door with my Kel light, with my flashlight. And I hear all the fighting stop. Then I hear the door rattle just a little bit. And the door opens like 4 inches. And this guy's head comes sticking through the door. And he looks at me and he goes, "What do you want?" And I grabbed the door and pulled it open. And I looked inside. And his old lady was laying on her back on top of the coffee table with the legs splattered completely out from under the table. Her dress was hiked up around her neck, and the crotch of her pantyhose was torn completely out with her legs in the air. And being a young rookie cop, I took one look at him and I go, "You're under arrest." I grabbed a hold of him and handcuffed him and put him in the car. Come to find out, there's a little thing we call Hoosier foreplay. They were just doing what they do before they have sex.
Good to have you, man. We're gonna close it off here, guys. Thank you all for watching. We actually had about
Peace.
10 plus viewers, so we're doing almost on par with the Red Man group, actually. I'm just some fucking nobody, you know. I'm just some nobody from the internet, so, you know.
Well, maybe this will go viral, and the ladies will figure out to save a horse and ride a cowboy.
There you go.